Mr. President, if you're ready, we'll dive right in.
Thank you.
You know, most countries in the world recognize Palestinian statehood. It's 147 of 193 countries at the UN. But France is going to be the first Western UN Security Council member to do so. What conditions are there for this?
Look, thank you, and thank you for being here and offering me the opportunity to have such a discussion. I think it was a necessity first to decide this recognition, and I will announce it on the 22nd of September at the United Nations, precisely because we are at a very moment where if we want peace and security for all in the region, we have to preserve the condition of a political perspective for everybody. So we will announce a recognition, but which is the beginning of a political process and a peace and security plan for everybody. So right after this recognition, we have a first phase, which is, I would say, the emergency phase. Ceasefire, release of all hostages, and third, restoring the humanitarian roads and the stabilization of Gaza. We have a second package, which is the day after. We will revert on that, how to organize Gaza in terms of governance, security, and reconstruction. And third package, the perspective of the two states. But recognizing a Palestinian state today is the only way to provide a political solution to a situation which has to stop.
But you are not making the release of the hostages a condition before recognition.
It will be for us a requirement very clearly before opening, for instance, any embassy in Palestine. But during weeks and weeks, months and months, we worked very hard with the Qatari, and I want to commend Qatar and Egypt for their role in these negotiations with the US administration and with Israel precisely to get this release of hostages. But let's be clear, if we conditionate this move to, I would say, the agreement of those who just don't want to stop this war, it's an endless process. So this is a clear condition before we will open an embassy. This is the first series of conditions and requirements we will put in the peace process. Mm-hmm. But we will announce the 22nd this recognition of Palestinian state.
So Secretary of State Marco Rubio said this is a reckless decision. That's the word he used. He said it gives Hamas little incentive to actually start diplomacy to release the hostages. Why do you disagree with that sequencing?
I think probably this is an excessive word, and I disagree with this approach. Why? Because the objective of Hamas is absolutely not to create a Palestinian state. The objective of Hamas is to destroy Israel, to convince the maximum number of people that they have no chance to have peace and stability and precisely a Palestinian state, mm-hmm. and to kill the maximum number of Israeli people. And this is why, if we want to stop this war, if we want to isolate Hamas, the recognition process and the peace plan which goes with this recognition process is a precondition. So my first point is to say, I don't answer the Hamas with that. I don't meet the expectations of Hamas. Hamas is just obsessed by destroying Israel. But I recognize the legitimacy of so many Palestinian people who want a state, who are a people, they want a nation, they want a state, and we should not push them towards Hamas. If we don't offer them a political perspective and such a recognition, the unique answer will be security, and they will be completely trapped by Hamas as the unique option. My second point is, thanks to this recognition and thanks to the diplomatic move we launched, we started to isolate Hamas because at the New York Declaration, which was voted, as you know, by 142 countries, we gathered all the Arab League states, all the leaders of the regions, to work closely with us to precisely dismantle and disarm Hamas. Mm-hmm. Till now, they were not engaged in such a move. Now, we gathered all these states, all these people to work closely with us in this move. So I think this is why we can create the condition of a concrete action. First, to give this right to the Palestinian people. Second, to isolate Hamas from the rest of the Palestinians and the whole region, and precisely build security. But let me tell you something which is for me very important in this context. Israel had wonderful security results against Hezbollah, Hamas, top leaders, and managed to neutralize a lot of top decision makers of terrorist groups. They did it. This is their merit. But in terms of fighting against Hamas, this is a failure today.
What is a failure?
Because they killed all the key leaders. This is a success. But at the beginning of this war, you had more or less 25,000 Hamas fighters. The Israeli army killed probably half of them, but Hamas managed to recruit the equivalent. You have as many fighters at the very beginning, which is the best evidence of the fact if we want to dismantle Hamas, the total war is not the answer, because it's just killing the credibility of Israel, and by the way, weakening and killing our own credibility if we don't make a move as the one we are organizing.
But you just pointed to something that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu would say, well, this is why we need to continue until we get rid of every Hamas member. You're saying you can't kill that idea. You need to provide a different idea?
Exactly. But this is the whole perspective. And look at the situation, not just, by the way, in Gaza, but everywhere in the region. Hamas was clearly not backed by a lot of people before the 7th of October. If you took the polls in Gaza, but in all the countries of the region, they were very low in all the polls. Today, the level of support is much higher because they are making the mistake, in fact, to reduce all the perspective of the Palestinians to the Hamas. What we have to say is, we want the dismantling of Hamas. You had this success, there is no more top leaders. We want to isolate them. We want to bring everybody working with us to dismantle the Hamas. But recognizing this right to have a Palestinian state through a diplomatic channel, this is just giving another channel and offering a political way and isolating Hamas. So I think there is no future with the option which would be just let's kill the maximum number of Hamas people, because they just recruit others and others. Because each time they launch this type of operations, they kill so many civilians that they are just destroying their own reputation and credibility, and they are creating an unsustainable framework of security in the whole region.
But since October 7th, popular support in Israel for a Palestinian state has also declined. Prime Minister Netanyahu has been opposed for a very, very long time. And now he says that just look at those attacks that day. If you allow for any kind of Palestinian state, it will be a launch pad for terrorism. I mean, that is his argument, that this shows you can't allow for the safety and security of Israel if there are two states. Why is he wrong?
First, I want to say that the 7th of October was a total trauma for everybody in our country here, because we had so many French people being killed during the 7th of October terrorist attack launched by Hamas. And it was for us one of the biggest terrorist attacks against our own fellow citizens. But we did share, and we do share, the pain and the suffer of Israeli people and so many families. And for me, the top priority remains the release of hostages. And I met very regularly families of hostages. And I have to say that what they live is unbearable. And I had the opportunity to meet with Yatar Guy's mother and so many of them. And what they describe is absolutely unbearable. But I consider that if we want precisely to build a sustainable peace for Israel itself and for Israeli people, a political process and the recognition of a Palestinian state, if this state recognizes the right of Israel to live and defend itself, is demilitarized, has security forces with a vetting process by Israel, with obviously a proper governance and reformed governance, and is precisely, we have a series of reform, which are part of the process.
But that's it, right? You're talking about recognizing the Palestinian Authority, which has some governance over the West Bank, already was working with Israeli security forces. But Hamas came to power through the ballot box.
Look,
in the first place.
If we are honest, it's totally different. And this is why I think let's accept the fact that a lot of people worked very hard to kill the credibility of the Palestinian Authority in Gaza years ago. Mm-hmm. And Hamas appeared as precisely a sort of alternative option. Mm-hmm. But the terrorist attacks were launched by Hamas, not by Palestinian Authority. And if we say all those living in Gaza and all those backing a Palestinian state are de facto the support of Hamas, there is no end to this war, except the day you kill everybody. And this is terrible. So we have to recognize that the Palestinian Authority has to be reformed. The governance is not satisfactory today. We need a new.
Leader is nearly 90 years old.
We need a new Palestinian Authority. But let's just remark, and please notice with me, that thanks to the recognition process we launched, mm-hmm. for the first time for many years, we got the 9th of June a series of clear commitments from the Palestinian Authority they refuse till now. The reform, a new vice president being elected, reform of the education program, a pay-for-slay, obviously, program as well, with the monitoring by a U.S. Audit structure. So,
and they denounced the attack. They denounced October 7th.
And for the very first time,
20 months later.
This is true. But for what? Because we made this move. Mm. So the recognition is the way as well to re-engage and bring them back in the table. And my point is to say, let's isolate Hamas and let's focus on the dismantling of Hamas from a military and a political point of view. In order to do so, we have to re-engage with those who can be, I would say, a political achievement for Palestinian people. And this is why the recognition is so important. And if we revert to West Bank, one of the key elements which triggered my decision to announce in July the perspective of the recognition for the 22nd of September is the vote of the Knesset. When the Knesset decided to start the settlements again in West Bank, mm-hmm. it was the best evidence of the fact that they don't want to fight against Hamas. There is no Hamas in West Bank. They just want to destroy the existing political bodies and the possibility of a two states. And I really believe this is a terrible mistake for Israel itself, because in doing so, they just kill any other perspective that war.
But I understand the argument you are making, but it has put you at direct odds with the Trump administration, who argue that your decision to make this recognition announcement, along with all these UN members, that it, in fact, kills the diplomacy they had underway. They said they were working to get, for example, the tax money from the Israelis to hand back over to the Palestinian Authority, that they were doing practical things on the ground to help Palestinians. Secretary Rubio said that West Bank division you were talking about with the settlements, he drew a direct line to your recognition. Why do you think they're blaming you for that?
Look, first, I think we all work very hard in order to improve the situation of people on the ground. And let me tell you that a lot of French people, French doctors, French citizens, French members of NGOs are working very hard with our administration as well to help Palestinian people. And during the past years, we worked very hard and financed a lot of actions as well, being led by UNRWA. Second, I think my objective is precisely to provide another perspective. We are closely coordinated with the US administration when we speak about the ceasefire and the release of hostages. We were always in close coordination with Secretary of State or key President Trump's advisors in order to work with Qatar, Egypt, and Israel on the release of hostages, a ceasefire. But your administration is focusing on the day after. And what we propose is a full-fledged plan where we have first the emergency package. So let's deliver release of all hostages, ceasefire, and humanitarian access. The day we have that, we start the day after. And I think we are very convergent with the work which is being done by your administration. What we want is a de facto governance in Gaza with clearly a sort of transitional administration, including the Palestinian Authority, excluding clearly Hamas, but with a vetting process of Israel and an association of all the neighbors. Mm-hmm. We have a security package in this day after approach, which is let's scale up the training of the policemen and security forces of the Palestinians.
Who will do that?
We are already doing that. We're doing so. Many countries of the regions. Mm-hmm. It does exist, but we need a scale up. And in parallel, we proposed and we worked very closely with the United Kingdom and all the leaders of the region precisely to offer I would say an international force to be deployed in Gaza mm-hmm. with a UN mandate, which is a unique framework to be defended and which could be legitimate to assist and back, I would say, these policemen and security forces.
But Israel does not trust the United Nations at all.
This is a UN framework, but this first they would have a vetting process of all the structure, and it would involve Jordan, Egypt, mm-hmm. and some others are ready as well to finance. But obviously it is to be made in close coordination with Israel. And in this security package, obviously the core element is the dismantling of Hamas. There is no other option if you want to fix the situation, to disarm the Hamas, and precisely to demobilize so many fighters, to organize what we call a DDR process, which is very familiar mm-hmm. to all the experts in this type of situation. And this is in this day after for Gaza, in the security package, that we can organize such a DDR vis-à-vis Hamas. And to be sure that Hamas will never be involved in the governance, but that Hamas will be disarmed, dismantled, with some key people to leave Gaza and some other to be de-radicalized and the weapons to be taken. In order to do so, you need clear security forces here, you need these international forces mm-hmm. to be here. And obviously we have the reconstruction. On that, I think there is a strong alignment with the United States. My point is the recognition and the process we launched with that is the only way to bring with us on this track all the neighbors and key countries in order to deliver such a package. And look at the situation today when Egypt, when so many leaders of the region are not comfortable with what is being done, mm-hmm. you need to re-engage them, and this is exactly what we are doing. But my point is to say, if we don't have this full package, the day after is impossible. Because today, de facto, you are accepting the displacement of population in Gaza City. How do you want a day after to be possible if you displace thousands of people?
Well, exactly on this point. When you say day after, that means when the war ends and some kind of rebuilding happens. What you're talking about with the Trump administration is this idea of having Palestinians leave Gaza by choice, they say, but some would say that is a step towards ethnic cleansing. In fact, an independent commission set up by the UN concluded Israel has a, quote, intent to destroy Palestinians in Gaza as defined by the Genocide Convention. Does France agree with that report?
No, we don't qualify as a genocide what's happening because it is not a political statement. This is the judges or the historians to qualify a genocide by a series of evidence and a clear jurisprudence and clear elements.
So you reject that report and that finding?
No, I don't reject the report. This is not my point. My point is it should not be a political debate. What's happening is clearly a lot of civilians are being killed de facto on the ground, and the project is to displace people. So I think this is a big mistake. And this is where I try to convince your administration that if we agree on the day after and we want this de facto authority, this security package, mm-hmm. the dismantling of Hamas and the reconstruction, let's work on the current day.
Right.
If you accept de facto Israel to displace these people, you will never see a day after. And by the way, I looked very carefully at all the plans being shared by your administration or shared by experts working for your administration. They always reiterate, let's work and build Gaza for Gazians. It means that they are ready to preserve and protect Palestinian people because Gazians are those who are living in Gaza. Mm-hmm. But if the precondition of such a plan is to push them out, this is just a craziness. So we should not be, for the credibility of the United States, for the credibility of France, we cannot be implicitly or explicitly complacent with such a project, because such a project, we know it. And by the way, all the security experts, even in Israel, are very clear on the fact it will be a humanitarian disaster. And this project will kill the possibility of a day after. So we have to be very explicit on the fact that attacking civilians just to get a few terrorists and a few fighters is clearly not acceptable, but displacing people in order just to take a territory, which is not in the hands of Israel, in order to prepare the day after, is not just totally crazy, but unacceptable for all of us.
So France has one of the largest, both Muslim and Jewish populations in all of Europe. The U.S. ambassador to France, Charles Kushner, the father of the son-in-law to the President of the United States, Jared's father, he published an article, and I know you've read it, saying France is not dealing with anti-Semitism here in France. He said, not a day passes without Jews assaulted in the street, synagogues or schools defaced, or Jewish-owned businesses vandalized. Your own Interior Ministry reported anti-Semitic incidents even at preschools. Do you accept this criticism as genuine and valid?
Not at all. I think this is a mistake and an unacceptable statement for somebody who is supposed to be a diplomat.
Unacceptable statement.
Yes, never a French ambassador will be allowed to do so. So either you are a person who wants to express freely, fine. If you are a diplomat, you have to follow the rule of diplomacy. And I'm not the one, this is you to pay the ambassador of the United States in France, but the taxpayer money is not properly used to finance this kind of statement. So this is not a speech, a letter, or a word of an ambassador. This is unacceptable. Now, the matter is much more important. And the matter about anti-Semitism is, for me, one of my top priorities. I was the first president in France to adopt a definition of anti-Semitism, making it the equivalent of anti-Zionism. And I've always been very engaged against anti-Semitism. We've worked very hard during the past few years in order to precisely re-engage, have faster sanctions, and I never neglected this topic.
But you know in the US sometimes people hear criticism of Israel as anti-Semitic.
No,
you're saying it's different.
No, my point is to say you cannot reject the existence of Israel. Anti-Zionism is unacceptable and is anti-Semitism. But it doesn't mean that you are not allowed to be in disagreement with the government of Israel. Otherwise, we will become crazy. I'm sorry, but I want to fight very hard against anti-Semitism. I'm deadly against any anti-Zionist speech. But I do endorse to be in disagreement with Prime Minister Netanyahu and some of his ministers on many topics. It doesn't make me an anti-Semitic. Otherwise, we are completely trapped in an impossible world. And this is precisely what the public debate makes this situation completely crazy. If we want peace and stability and unity, we have to be precise, sharp, and respectful. So in this country, for many years, we had this problem with anti-Semitism, like in a lot of other countries. What I disagree with is the argument made by your ambassador and the Prime Minister of Israel in another public letter, making a link between the recognition and anti-Semitism. You have a surge of anti-Semitism in the US, and you don't recognize. You have a surge of anti-Semitism in Germany, nothing to deal with recognition. Everywhere we have such a surge of anti-Semitism. It started before the 7th of October. A lot of these guys expressed their anti-Semitism the 7th of October itself. As awful it could be, but they did. And it increased after. We have to fight against this phenomenon. We have to read, first we have to sanction. We just passed a law for our high schools and universities to improve the regulations and to be in a situation to sanction all the anti-Semitism being expressed there. So we are very hard. We work very hard with the Jewish community in our country. And Jewish people are part of the DNA of the French Republic. So no chance anybody here will abandon the situation.
Has this hurt your relationship with the U.S.?
No,
No.
I don't think so.
Because you do have a few other points of friction right now, or different views than the Trump administration.
But my objective on this on this issue is very clearly to engage on the basis of the plan we will put on the table with the U.S. administration. And there is an important work which is made by Mr. Witkoff, Secretary Rubio, but as well Jared Kushner and Tony Blair. So we had many exchanges with these people, and they work very hard on important ideas. So my objective is clearly to engage with the administration and to show that we can clearly articulate what they have in mind and a full-fledged peace and security plan for all.
I want to ask you about what's happening here in Europe in regard to Russia. NATO jets were scrambled twice within just the past few weeks because of these Russian drones that have been crossing into Poland and into Romania. It's the first time in NATO's history that they had to shoot down enemy crafts that had crossed in. Do you believe that these incursions could have been a mistake, as President Trump has suggested?
Very clearly, Russia is a destabilizing and aggressive power in Europe. They increased during the past few weeks their attacks against Kiev and killing a lot of civilians. They destroyed official buildings of the Ukrainian government, but as well premises of the UK government, of the European Union. And at the same time, during the same weeks, they violated the Polish and the Romanian air. Mm-hmm. There is no mistake. There is just a project which is to destroy the maximum territories of Ukraine, to have a victory in Ukraine, and just to highlight what they want, the weakness of NATO.
NATO says they're still investigating. They're not as certain as you seem to be that Russia did this intentionally.
I just say this is not totally. This is not a specific point. If we had a situation where they were declining or decreasing their attacks against Kiev and on the battlefield, I could accept this argument. My point is to say it's largely beyond that. My point is to say, look at what they did during the past few weeks. So I sincerely believe that your president was committed and is committed to make peace in Ukraine. And he engaged, he took the risk to make a summit with President Putin in Anchorage, and he asked for negotiations. And I think he's right. But at the same time, I have to recognize that there is no clear willingness of President Putin to be sincerely engaged in such a move. Because as we were working on a diplomatic way, as we were trying to organize bilateral, trilateral, quadrilateral summit, the Russians were increasing their assaults in Donbass, but not just in Donbass, intensified provocations on one side and attacks on Kyiv on the other side. Mm-hmm. So I just look at the facts, and your president is as well looking at the facts. So now what do? We have to increase sanctions against Russia, but we have to find a way to precisely put more pressure on Russia to bring them back at the table. In parallel, let me insist on one point. When we came to Washington, D.C., a series of European leaders with President Zelensky, we took a commitment. We will work to provide to Ukraine security guarantees, and we delivered. A few days ago here in Paris, we gathered what we call the Coalition of the Willing. You have 30 countries working together in order to provide the day after peace security guarantees to Ukraine. So we have all these elements now with an historical commitment of the Europeans to provide these security guarantees to Ukraine. What we need now is Ukraine to be at the table with Russia and negotiating what a peace agreement could be. On territory, on security guarantee, on de-escalation, on recovery, etc.
And you don't see any evidence of Russian interest. I mean, it's
so
been more
now
than
we have to step up, and we need political, military, and economic surge in order to bring them back at the table and to negotiate.
So to that point, because it's now more than a month since that Alaska summit, that big risk you said President Trump took, when he's been asked, so why not put sanctions or secondary tariffs on Russia, he points back here at Europe. And the consumption of Russian oil and gas that still takes place. I know Hungary and Slovakia, for example, continue to use it.
This is true, and we are fixing it. And we had discussion with Ursula von der Leyen, and she made a great work with her teams to fix that. But let's be honest, this is very marginal. This is not a key driver today. We decreased by more than 80% the consumption of oil and gas. And I can tell you that because we were not the most impacted as a country because we were less dependent on this oil and gas coming from Russia. But we have to finalize, to finish the job, this is true. But now, it's clearly much more that what we have to do. We have to step up our support to Ukraine, and we have to provide a way to better resist to the new attacks on Kyiv and civilians.
What's the delay on the sanctions or tariffs then?
As soon as possible. If it depends just on me, tomorrow. But it doesn't just depend on me. So I think we have to react collectively. If you want my strong view, I think it's very important. I think we all agree we want peace. We all agree the problem is Russia because they don't want peace. So now we have to increase the pressure to convince Russia to come back at the table.
Because the Trump administration has pointed to the idea that there are billions of dollars sitting in European bank accounts that could be seized, for example, or that, here you could put more tariffs on China or sanctions on China. Are these valid arguments by the administration, or is it a diversion?
Regarding the frozen assets, we are all very much attached to be compliant with international rules, and you cannot seize these assets from the central bank, even in such a situation. And I think it's a matter of credibility, and it's very important that our countries remain the garant and do respect the international laws, because this is our problem everywhere. If we speak about Middle East, if we speak about the situation in Ukraine, when some countries start to disrespect international laws and when we are not sufficiently strong, this is the beginning of a total chaos. So we will respect international law, we are predictable, and we will not do all impossible things with these frozen assets. We already took them as not as a collateral, but we took this frozen asset, and all the proceeds coming from this frozen assets were used to finance our efforts, part of our effort to Ukraine. This is the first point. As for your second point, it was, sorry?
I asked about the China aspect, that the Trump administration would like you to push back on China more.
Look, I think we will have our own diplomacy on China, and we are very much attached to our independence, and which is normal. And we have a de-risking strategy, but we are not in a decoupling strategy.
So that's a no on the pressure from the administration to do that.
But my point is, let's focus on some secondary sanctions, if they make sense. I think what we have to do is to engage a serious dialogue in order to see where and in which capacity Russia is helped by third countries. And to increase the pressure. So I think this approach is a good one, but it should be targeted and directly related to Russia. And I don't think what we will do as Europeans with the US administration, it is working hard in order, capacity by capacity, product by product, to see the key countries allowing Russia sometimes to have a third way and to avoid sanctions, or to benefit from the current situation. This is what we call the secondary sanction, because you don't sanction directly Russia, but a third country which is helping them. And this job has to be made, has already started technically. I'm totally in favor of this job.
And just final question here, to ask you again about NATO. The US has not contributed fighter jets to that new effort that was just recently announced after the drone incursions. The Supreme Allied Commander is an American, but does that signal something to you? Does that concern you that the United States isn't more muscular here?
No, I'm not concerned or worried about that. I want to say that The NATO Secretary General worked very hard, and we all gathered and exchanged information with the Polish Prime Minister and the Polish President in the hours right after this, what happened. And for instance, UK and France stepped up and we sent fighters. But it's fine, we were in a situation to do so, and we are totally credible. But at the same time, look at what the US is doing on the eastern flank of NATO. You are a very strong contributor and reliable partner, so I don't want to diminish this role and your commitment. And I think your president was very clear about as well his commitment to NATO. But I'm totally in line with the fact that the Europeans have to step up. I've defended for years the fact that we need more independence, more strategic autonomy in Europe, and we need a stronger European pillar. This is why, by the way, right after my first election, I started to increase the budget of our army, and in 10 years we will have doubled this budget. And I'm already in favor of having all the Europeans increasing their budget, their defense expenditures, and as well building an actual industry, research and development basis for defense and security, working together and building a strong, consistent European pillar in NATO. Because it's fair that the US wants to focus much more on its own security or wants to work much more on the Pacific side, and asks Europeans to be more engaged and committed for their own security. I share this perspective, and this is one of the priorities of the Europeans.
Mr. President, thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much for being here and offering me this opportunity to explain our views.
Thank you.
Thank you.